Hey everybody, we are going to talk today about the characteristics of life. So what basically makes something a living thing? There are some different characteristics about what an organism needs to be in order to be considered alive. And you're going to have some different activities and assessments where you're going to have to be able to recognize if something is living or non-living. So we're going to go straight into that. You should be taking your notes. Again, it's always a great idea to be doing a multitask situation where you are taking your notes and also doing your flashcards at the same time. It's not a requirement, but it is a good idea. So let's get right into it. All right, so our essential question for characteristics of life. So I would like you to put the essential question at the start of your notes. So this is the first thing that you will have. And your essential question is, what are the characteristics of life? So by the end of this video, you should be able to answer this essential question. All right, so we've got a couple of examples of living things up here on the screen, different examples of organisms that are living, and you can see what those are right in here. Here you have a question. Are all these pictures of living things, these different photos that you can see? So you've got a chimp here, got a little rotifer here, and a picture of some different pods, okay? So when you're talking characteristics of life, we're going to identify 8 characteristics of living things, and these 8 things all need to be present in order for something to be considered alive, okay? So number 1, the first characteristics of life is that living things are made of cells, okay? No matter what, in order to be considered a living thing, it has to be made up of cells. Okay, number 2, living things can reproduce. They can produce offspring. Third, living things have a genetic code, so DNA. Okay, they have a code for what they're going to look like, how they're going to be structured. Living things grow and develop, so they don't just get bigger, so growth is getting larger, but they also develop, so they get larger and change over time. The 5th one, living things use and need energy. Another word for this is metabolism, so they're able to use energy, they metabolize. 6, living things respond to stimuli. So you have either an internal or an external, an inside or an outside stimulus. And if it's alive, it's going to respond to that stimulus. 7, living things maintain homeostasis. And we'll get into what homeostasis is, but homeostasis basically means balance. So living things maintain balance. And lastly, living things adapt and evolve. Okay, so they adapt to and evolve in their, sorry, my computer just went off, evolve to their environment. All right. Okay, so that first one, we're going to go more into detail. So if you want to go back and just take a look at this characteristics of life, you should have these listed in order in your notes. This is a good idea, okay, to just list them. And now we're going to go step by step each one, and you're going to get more information about each of those steps. So you want to now start a new section and do each section. Okay, so living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic unit of life. They are the smallest living unit. If you are unicellular, that means you're made of one cell. Uni meaning one and cellular meaning cell. Multicellular, multi meaning many, and cellular cell. So living things are made of cells. You can either have a unicellular organism, which is one cell organism, or a multicellular made of many cells. So here's some examples of unicellular organisms. You have a paramecium here, an amoeba here. We will be doing a pond water lab where you should be able to see examples of this in water from the pond that you have a tour video of. Actually, we have one on campus, so there's a pond tour that you should be seeing. And these are some of the organisms you can find there. All right, characteristic number 2 that living things produce. Living things produce offspring that look like or resemble the parents. So in order to be living, you have to be able to produce offspring. And reproduction can occur 2 ways. You can have asexual reproduction, which means one parent, basically an organism making a clone of itself, okay? Or sexual reproduction with 2 parents. And in that case, example would be like a sperm and an egg cell, so 2 somatic cells that come together to make a new organism. And here we have a cute picture of puppies here, and then we've got an amoeba kind of splitting. So this would be asexual reproduction here, where you've got a cell, a unicellular organism, making a copy of itself and reproducing. This is like the clone type situation. And then here you have the example of sexual reproduction with these adorable curly fluffy puppies where they had genetic material from mom and genetic material from dad, and now we've created a new organism. All right, third characteristic, living things have a genetic code. And here we have a picture of the double helix of the DNA. So inherited traits are carried in the DNA. So when we had those cute fluffy puppies, their color and their size and their shape, all of that was carried in their DNA, their genetic code. And all cells have DNA. So all of our cells in our nucleus contain the genetic material, the DNA code. All right, fourth characteristic, living things grow and develop. And here we've got an example of a plant starting from a seed and going all the way up to the mature plant. All right, so growth is an increase in size and shape. And again, you can see the seed starts with a small structure, and then it grows larger. And then development means it matures over time. So living things grow and develop. They do get larger, as you can see here, and they also develop, meaning they change. So we go from just the seed with a small root to a large plant that contains stem and leaves as well as a root system. So growth and development. And then they have a lifespan. They live and they die. Death is not non-living. Death does not mean that something isn't alive. Death is a part of the living cycle. So you're going to have a span of beginning to end. All right, fifth, living things use and need energy. All organisms require energy and raw materials, so food. If a living thing uses energy, then you can say that's a characteristic of life. This is also called metabolism. So some of you may have heard like, hey, you have a fast metabolism or something to that effect, meaning that you use a lot of energy very quickly. Okay, so metabolism is basically the sum of all the chemical reactions in your body needed for life, burning and storing and all that kind of stuff. What is food for plants or bacteria? Do you guys have an idea for that? Maybe think about that for a second. And organisms need energy for lots of different things. They need energy for reproducing. They need energy for growing and developing, responding to stimuli, maintaining homeostasis. You need to have energy in order to have those characteristics of life. All right, 6, living things respond to stimuli. Okay, so in this picture, you can see we're giving an example of a stimulus. Stimuli is an event that causes a response in an organ or a tissue. And in this case, we've turned on the stove burner and it is what? It's hot, okay? And this person is apparently checking the temperature of the stove coil, which I would not recommend. Do not try at home. She touches the hot plate and her response is, ouch, that is really hot and I burned my hand, okay? The reaction is the response to stimuli. And in this case, we have this example of the hot stovetop and touching the hot stovetop, but can you think of any other examples of response to stimuli? All right, 7th, living things maintain homeostasis. Okay, so homeostasis is balance. It's the place where that organism likes to be. It's where that organism is optimally working. So homeostasis, definition, an internal balance, optimal place where that wants to live. Okay, an example for you is your blood sugar. Okay, if anybody knows anybody who has diabetes, that can be an issue for someone with diabetes, blood sugar. We all have blood sugar level that is optimal, and if it gets too high or too low, our pancreas, okay, releases insulin, or we get glucagon that come and balance out our blood sugar, okay? Another example that I can give you is the thermostat in your house. I mean, it's not a living example, but it can be similar, right? So the thermostat in your house, you have a set point. Let's say I set mine to 70 degrees. And if it gets too hot, if my thermostat says now it's 75 degrees, okay, so here's 70 degrees, my temperature goes to 75 degrees, what's going to happen? It's going to turn on my air conditioning and cool my house down back to 70 degrees, back to the homeostatic point that I want to be at. If my house gets too cold, I go below 70 degrees, okay? It brings it back up. Now, can we think of something like that in our bodies? Is there a way we respond to temperature? Let's say I go to the desert and I'm outside and it's 120 degrees outside and I stand out in the sun. What's going to happen to me? I'm going to start sweating, right? I'm going to start sweating. And when I sweat and the wind and the air goes on my sweat, it's going to cool my body temperature down because my body temperature got too hot. Now, let's say you go to Alaska and you do one of those crazy ice pool jumping challenges and you go straight into a frozen water pond full of ice, okay, and water, and you jump in and you get out. What are you going to start doing immediately? You're going to shiver and get so cold. Well, why are you shivering? You're shivering because your body temperature dropped, and now you want to get back to the homeostatic point, the optimal temperature, 98.6. So you shiver. Your body moves to generate heat so it can bring you back up. That's homeostasis. All right, living things adapt and evolve. This is the last characteristic, okay? Adapt means that they're going to make changes, okay, to long-range changes in the environment. You have a picture here of a giraffe. Something changed in the environment. The trees got taller, and there wasn't food at the lower ends, so the giraffe's neck gets larger, or longer in this case, to be able to reach those high areas. So these changes result in better survival. This giraffe, if he stays with a short neck and there's no leaves for him to eat, will starve and he will die. He won't be able to pass on his genetic code. So as the organism adapts, okay, as the tree leaves continue to get higher, the neck becomes longer and longer so that it reaches a point where that giraffe can then easily reach the food source and survive. Okay, and evolution and adaptation take place over a long period of time. It's not like this giraffe has a short neck and then their children have a long neck. It's over generations of time. It could be multiple generations before they actually evolve and get that adaptation, optimal adaptation, in this case, the really long neck, to reach those goals. It's not instantaneous. And it involves the entire species. So it happens for the whole species of giraffe, not just one isolated population. All right. We're going to take a look at these really quick. This is more of things that we don't need.